Good evening. My name's Tony Cascardi, and as the director of the Townsend Center, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this year's Una's Lecture. In fact, I have the pleasure of welcoming you twice, once to the Una's Lecture itself, and second to this evening's speaker, Greil Marcus. As many of you may know, Una's gift to Berkeley was established as an endowment for, and I quote, distinguished scholars in the field of the humanities for the purpose of delivering one or more lectures, meeting with faculty and students in their fields, and conducting or participating in seminars, colloquia, or other such activities. Hosted by the Townsend Center, previous Una's lectures have included Nicholson Baker, J.M. Cotea, Anthony Grafton, Robert Post, and others. One of the ideals that formed the basis for Una's gift was stated by Una Smith's husband, Edward Hunter Ross, on the occasion of the bequest. Universities have a basic obligation to develop the intellects committed to their guidance, he said. Deeper understanding of human beings and their achievements can contribute to this, as can fresh interpretations of the motives of ancient heroes and villains, keener analysis of accepted tenets and dogmas, reawakened appreciation for ignored and forgotten forms of beauty, and regrouping of old facts to reach new conclusions. The Una's lectures were made part of this gift, not, and I quote, with the aim of providing practical advice or at improving the world, but rather at opening the individual mind. End of quote. This year's speaker, Greil Marcus, is someone whose work has done all these things and more. Best known as a critic of American popular music and its rock icons from the 1950s and 60s to the present, Greil Marcus has himself become something of an American icon. As an editor of Rolling Stone magazine, he almost single-handedly defined the parameters of rock music criticism, what it could and would be. Already in 1975, with the publication of his book Mystery Train, he demonstrated a pioneering ability to read the cultural and intellectual landscape of the present and to interpret it historically. Who else in that decade would have thought to place the new icons of rock and roll in the context of such imaginary American archetypes as Jay Gatsby or Moby Dick? The truth is that Greil Marcus' uncanny insights into the patterns of the popular American musical imagination went on to inspire countless number of subsequent rock critics, even while he continued to outdistance them by virtue of his ear and pen. His next book, perhaps his most famous, was no less ambitious. Lipstick Traces, A Secret History of the 20th Century, blazed brilliantly across an incredibly broad swath of Western culture. Taking punk rock as a transhistorical cultural phenomenon, Marcus uncovered a series of truly astonishing connections between groups and movements as diverse as the Sex Pistols, Dadaists, and Medieval Heretics. And I don't think Medieval Heretics is here referring to a rock band. I think he means the heretics of the Middle Ages. I haven't seen, and so can only imagine, what the theatrical version of Lipstick Traces might be like. In fact, it was adapted as a play in 1999 and has been performed at many locations around the world in the years since. His subsequent works include a 1991 collection of writings about Elvis Presley entitled Dead Elvis, and the 1993 book Ranters and Crowd Pleasers that looks at post-punk political pop, as well as the irresistible volumes The Dustbin of History and In the Fascist Bathroom. He has conducted a long-standing dialogue with Bob Dylan's work, one of the fruits of which is a study of the so-called basement tapes entitled Invisible Republic. Greil Marcus has taught and lectured at many universities, including Princeton and the New School University. Those of you who have had the pleasure of hearing him speak on Dylan's Masters of War, as I did at commencement exercises a few years ago, will have some sense of what a truly engaging speaker he is. For this semester, the man whom the Boston Globe once described as the bespectacled zeitgeist surfer, is hanging out at UC Berkeley, teaching for us, and tonight spending some time with us as the 2008 Una's Lecture. The presentation runs about an hour, and so with your consent, we'll postpone questions until tomorrow afternoon, when at 4 p.m. in the Townsend Center, 220 Stevens Hall, Professor Shannon Steen of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies and Brian Wagner of English will offer their comments on the talk, and when you two will have a chance to inject questions and comments into the conversation, which we hope will be an ongoing one. There will be a reception to which you're all cordially invited following tomorrow's event. For now, please make sure that your cell phones, pagers, alarm watches, and other similar devices whose names I might not be able to mention or recall are either silenced or set to off, and please join me, there we go, in welcoming this year's Una Lecture, Greil Marcus.
Well, thank you, Tony, and thank you all for coming. We're going to start with a video. Probably the most well-known images of blackface that have come down to us at this point in our history are from Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer in 1927. What I'm going to show you tonight is a sound film that was made the year before. The Jazz Singer is known, God knows how accurate it really is, as the first talking picture. But this is a year before, when Vitaphone was already making talkie shorts, musical shorts, comedy shorts. And for many, many years, the visual part, the film was known, the film was available, and nobody had access to the sound recordings, which were made on enormous discs. And they were discovered a couple of years ago, a whole cache of them in, a Vermont attic. That's where these things are always found. And it took a number of years and many scientists to be able to put the things back in sync so that they could restore the talkies. So this is Al Jolson in a plantation act from 1926.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet. You ain't heard a thing. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sing you a little song that the rule of folks love to hear me sing. It's a little mammy song, and a very funny thing. People have been making fun of mammy songs, and I don't really think it's right that they should. Well, after all, mammy songs are the fundamental songs of our country. And not only that, you take John McCormick, the famous radio singer. He sings Mother McCree. And that's a mammy song, and folks, he ain't bad. So if you don't mind, I'm going to sing you my little mammy song, Rock-a-bye, your rock-a-bye, baby, with a Dixie melody, if you please. Mammy mine, your little rolling stone that rolled away. Mammy mine, your little rolling stone is home today. Let us stay. I want to see your smiling face. Smile a welcome smile. I want to feel your fun embrace. Listen, Mammy mine. Your baby with a Dixie melody. When you croon, you're a little croon from the heart of Dixie. Just hang that cradle, mammy mine, right on that Mason-Dixon line, and swing it from Virginia to Tennessee with all of your soul. Come on, my lady, mammy, sing it again for me. And old Black Joe, just as though you heard me on your knees. A million baby kisses I'll deliver if you will only sing the Swanee River. Rock-a-bye, oh rock-a-bye, baby, without Dixie rock-a-bye. Oh, rock your little baby with a Dixie melody. When you croon, doing a little tune from the heart of Dixie. Just hang that fatal mammy mine right on that Mason-Dixon line and swing it from Virginia to Tennessee with all of the soul that's in the world. Mammy, listen what they're playing. There's no more, my lady. Sing it again for me. Can you remember? You remember old like the old love you, mammy, you sang when I was on your knee. A million baby kisses I delivered. Sing the Swanee River, rock-a-bye, baby, with a Dixie,
So that's Al Jolson. He was born in Lithuania in 1886. Comes to the United States in 1894. He's a singer in New York by 1898. He first blacks up in 1909 and becomes a huge star. He joins Lou Dockstatter's Minstrels in 1911, and then he becomes one of the most prominent and important singers in America. He completely dominates every part of American musical culture that Bert Williams is not dominating. And Bert Williams, as I'm sure most of you know, the Caribbean American blackface performer. Well, there are interesting things about what you just saw. For one thing, Jolson doesn't imitate the black voice. He makes no pretense of doing that. He makes no pretense, and he's a huge star there, and everybody knows that. He makes no pretense that he isn't Al Jolson, that he really is a plantation field hand. He's there to instruct, to teach, to entertain. Mammy songs are the foundation songs of our country. What a weird thing to say. He's not giving up an inch. The other odd thing about it is when Al Jolson is not wearing blackface, he's completely ordinary looking. He's bland looking, and he's ordinary in his demeanor. Blackface gives him an aura, and it also gives him protection and a personality that would never emerge and doesn't emerge when he isn't wearing blackface, comes out, and that personality is glamorous, and it's liberated, and it's physical. Now that's the literal blackface. That's blackface as it's come down to us. But blackface is anything but literal. This is Constance Work, the author in 1931 of American Humor, one of the inventors of American studies. Peddlers may have been chock full of metaphysics, but the same has always been true of the blackface minstrel, and the blackface minstrel was Constance Work's most elusive and treasured subject. Chock full of metaphysics, Melvin B. Townsend is best known today as the debating coach of the great African-American debate teams from Wiley College in Marshall, Texas in the 1930s. But he was also a poet. And in the 1930s, he wrote a series called A Gallery of Harlem Portraits, and it wasn't published until 13 years after his death in 1979. And in that collection was a poem called Sooty Joe. Somebody has to black hisself for somebody else to stay white. And that's where the metaphysics come into play. That is a couplet that I've been trying to understand for the last 2 years, and every time I think I've just about got it, it kind of flies away. It is absolutely elusive. And it's the literal white man's blackface, the white man putting on blackface, that hides the metaphysics that blackface really contains. Because metaphysics hardly seems like a big enough word for what blackface does and where it goes. Here is Bart Bull, one of the early modern scholars of blackface, in a book called Does This Road Go to Little Rock? And he's talking about John Lomax, the folklorist and song collector who discovered Leadbelly in the 1930s. John Lomax dressed Leadbelly in prison stripes, coon stripes, the stripes of minstrelsy. And he brought him before East Coast audiences. Not much of a liberal himself, he knew how to work bleeding heart Northerners like a pinball machine. A minstrel show was still a hot ticket up north, even if the white man was no longer wearing blackface, even if he was wearing an entire black man instead. Well, that was the 1930s, and nothing has changed. I'm sure that many of you have been reading the story about Margaret B. Jones, also known as Margaret Seltzer. This is the woman who published a book called Love and Consequences that was reviewed in the New York Times just last week, a rave review. One of these, you can't believe this story. Damn right you can't believe this story. Of a white girl, half American Indian, who is kicked from foster home to foster home until finally at the age of 8, she ends up in South Central LA in the home of a woman known as, you can't make this stuff up, Big Mom. And 2 of her brothers are in the Bloods, and 2 of her sisters, her foster sisters, are born addicted to crack, but never mind. She goes in, she joins, she follows her brothers into the Bloods. She becomes a drug runner. Right, in South Central LA, you've got a nice white girl, teenager, walking around the streets all by herself, and the cops are driving up and down the streets, and they don't ask her what she's doing there. No problem. You look at the picture that comes with the review, and you say, where's the American Indian part? I'm not seeing that. And it will destroy you what this person had to do, and it's almost unbelievable that she got out of it. A week ago today, in the House and Home section of the New York Times, there is a visit with her in her house in Eugene, Oregon, and there she is, keeping a pit bull in a cage. Kind of the sign of her past life, because she used to breed pit bulls and sell them to gang members. And would she go back to LA? Would she go back to the life? I'd go back in a second if it wasn't for my daughter, but I don't want her to go to those terrible schools in South Central. But boy, the pull, to be there, once a Blood, always a Blood. I'm still a Blood. I'm just not an active member. And this goes on, and at one point, she's cooking black-eyed peas with pork neck bones, which is a recipe she got from Big Mom. She has this little box. Everybody's dead now. Her brothers are dead. Her sister committed suicide. She's got a little box of recipes, and she's going to publish them as a cookbook. And, after the movie, and it's her sister who rats her out. It's her sister who calls up and says, we grew up in Sherman Oaks with our parents, and she went to an Episcopal day school, and she's never been to any of those places. Now, there's the story. There is the book, the relationship between these 2 sisters. That is interesting. But here is a white woman wearing an entire black woman on her, just like John Lomax and Leadbelly. But metaphysics. There is a recording made by Alan Lomax, John Lomax's son, along with the black sociologist and musicologist John Work and Lewis Jones, people who originally were never credited for the work that they did with Lomax, for the people they found, for the recordings they made, for the interviews that they got. This was a recording made in 1941 in Coahoma County, Mississippi, in the Ararat Baptist Church. the Reverend C.H. Savage. And he and his congregation have just performed a song called Rock Daniel, about Daniel in the lion's den. And then Lomax sits down to interview Reverend Savage about this song, and we're going to listen to that interview, I hope.
Making the trip. Now, why is the thing about Daniel in the first place? Well, we refer to Daniel because Daniel went through the same trouble that we are going through now. See, because he was persecuted, put in the lion's den for the word of God and all that. So we get Daniel for a reference.
Well, who did you learn that song from? Do you remember when you learned it?
Yes, sir. My grandmother. I heard my grandmother sing that when I was a boy.
Did she have anything to say about that song that you can remember?
Yes, sir.
What'd she tell you?
She said that in slavery time, they would gather around, they weren't allowed to have a free asset worship like we're doing today. And they would get off in some secret place in the woods and they would put their head around the pots to keep old master from hearing their voice. And when they began to sing that, you know,
these are slaves who go off into the woods, and the only way they can sing their songs is to put their heads in black cast iron pots and sing into the pots so that they will sing to the earth. And not only are they wearing black cast iron pots over their faces, the whole earth becomes a kind of blackface, becomes a mask they can hide behind, but through which they can still speak. Another example, another story, Percival Everett, in his novel Erasure from 2001. Everett was born in 1956. He's an English professor at USC. He's an experimental novelist. And often you can't tell if his characters are black or white. His novel Frenzy is a romp through Greek mythology, and reviewers have often complained that he doesn't take it as his task to illuminate the condition of the African American in our society today. So he says in Erasure, you want black? I'll give you black. You're going to have to accept a deconstructionist as a narrator, a family of doctors, including a gay plastic surgeon in Arizona, but I'll give you black. In fact, on the book cover, I'll even give you a nice, cute little photo montage of an 8-year-old black boy holding a gun to his head. In Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, the hero is erased by the refusal of white America to see him, or for that matter, for black America to see him. Whoever he might be, whoever he was, wherever he might be in the future, he's been erased. He becomes a type. He doesn't exist. And if the world won't see him, he won't see the world. And so he lives in a basement powered by those famous 1,369 light bulbs that are running off bootleg electricity. He's sitting there drinking his slow gin, listening to Louis Armstrong's 1929 recording of What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue? Well, the narrator of Erasure is Thelonious Ellison. He says, call me monk. He makes it clear right off the bat, he has dark skin, he has a broad nose, he went to Harvard, he can't dance, and he can't play basketball. His novel, The Persians, was dismissed by all critics because as a reworking of Aeschylus, one critic wrote, one is lost to understand what it has to do with the African American experience. So he's in Washington, D.C. He's at the Nouveau Roman Society. He's going to be delivering his paper F/V, placing the experimental novel. Now, he says this is essentially a fraud, this paper. He put nothing into it. And this becomes the key to the novel. It tells you about Thelonious Ellison's gift for satire, the pull toward being an imposter, and his need for self-abasement. He says in this paper, absolutely nothing was at stake for me. He hopes sort of that it will make people mad, but he's worried that the people in the audience at this semiotic conference will not be smart enough to get the point and get mad. His motto, really, and the last line of the paper, a reiteration of the obvious is never wasted on the oblivious. Well, at this point, his world absolutely shatters. 7 years before, his father killed himself. Now his sister is shot to death at an abortion clinic. His brother comes out of the closet, leaves his wife and children, and his world completely falls apart. His mother's Alzheimer's is destroying her personality. And through all of this, Thelonious Ellison is competent, he's dedicated, he's devoted, he's absolutely a genius of self-control, except for a book that's shooting up the bestseller list. It's the first novel by a young black writer named Juanita Mae Jenkins, and I think you'll get a little echo here of Margaret B. Jones. Wheeze lives in the ghetto, and it is a horrifying portrait of the degradation of the American black woman by the American black man. And this book is driving him crazy. And the book confirms all of America's simultaneous impulses towards social work and concentration camps as answers to all questions of race. The book offers its black heroine uplift and deliverance, and it offers its white readers the certainty that no matter how high black Americans may lift themselves up, it will never be to their level. Thelonious Ellison has read it all before. He's read it all his life. It's the opposite of Invisible Man, a book that never holds still for the reader. This is a fixed target. It's what Albert Murray, writing about Claude Brown's Man-Child in the Promised Land, a Harlem memoir, a book that in its time was embraced by the literati as proof that if one black man had somehow escaped Harlem, just about everybody else was going to have to stay there. This is the kind of book that Albert Murray called social science fiction. Nevertheless, Wheeze lives in the ghetto. Enormous paperback advances, a movie deal. The book is everywhere. And Juanita Mae Jenkins goes on Oprah. When I was 12, I went to visit some relatives in Harlem for a couple of days. And that's where the novel comes from. A couple of days. Ellison has never been to Harlem. For that matter, he's never been to Compton. But so what? Any Toni Morrison or Alice Walker can do the rape, incest, prostitution, black woman enslaved by black man trope. What about the guy who has to do all the work? And so Ellison falls into a trance. I sat and stared at Juanita Mae Jenkins' face on Time magazine. The pain started in my feet and coursed through my legs, up my spine and into my brain, and I remembered passages of Native Son and The Color Purple and Amos and Andy, and my hands began to shake, the world opening up around me, tree roots trembling on the ground outside, people in the street shouting dint, axe, foe, screet, and fav, and I was screaming inside. I was complaining I didn't sound like that my mother didn't sound like that my father didn't sound like that. And I imagined myself sitting on a park bench, counting the knives in my switchblade collection. And a man came up to me and he asked me what I was doing, and my mouth opened and I couldn't help what came out. Wifo, you be axin'. So he writes a novel in the voice of one Van Gogh Jenkins. He's a 19-year-old California black man with 4 babies by 4 women. Babies named Aspirina, Tylenol, Dexatrina, and Rexall. The name of the book, which is included in Erasure in Full, is My Pathology, P-A-F-O-L-O-G-Y. And the author is Stagg R. Lee. He sends it to his agent. He doesn't even want to publish it. He doesn't know why he's sending it. But almost overnight, his agent is dangling a fortune in front of him. And what happens to Thelonious Ellison is a wonderful, hideous joke, but My Pathology is not a joke. Ellison can disrespect anybody who'd read an idiot satire like this as real life, who might fall for spellings like aspirina or chapter 5, who can't tell Stagger Lee from Staggerly, but he can't disrespect words. The novel is stupid and ridiculous, but no more so than Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho, and it's just as carefully made. As a reader of my pathology, a reader of Erasure with his dead sister, with his broken brother, with his ruined mother, you enter my pathology with a feeling of relief, and you rush right through it, just as Ellison did when he wrote it. The work inhabited no space artistically that I could find intelligible, Ellison says, but America has no such problem. It finds Stagger Lee, presented as an ex-con who refuses to speak to anyone, perfectly intelligible. A reiteration of the obvious is never wasted on the oblivious. As an experimental novelist, Thelonious Ellison has never made public sense. But as my pathology turns into the hottest property in the country, as it becomes clear that America will pay anything to hear the story it tells, Ellison ceases to exist. And as he steps to the stage to receive the National Book Award, he realizes he can only do it as Stagger Lee, and he has been erased by his own blackface. Now, nevertheless, with all these metaphysics, the literal rules. And the literal blackface is poison. It remains as poisonous today as it ever was. You can listen to the great Americanist scholar Gerald Early and get a taste of it. There'll be more, but this is just a taste. This is from Dancing in the Dark, Race, Sex, the South, and Exploitative Cinema from Oxford American a couple of years ago. It's about the 1964 film Black Like Me. Early, based on the famous journalistic account of white Southerner John Howard Griffin's travels through the South disguised as a black man. And when I saw the trailer, and Gerald Early would have been 12, when I saw the trailer, I thought it was a horror movie. James Whitmore, can we see James Whitmore? Here's James Whitmore in Black Like Me. I thought it was a horror movie. James Whitmore, who played the Griffin character, was simply covered in burnt cork. He didn't seem like a black person at all to me, but rather like somebody disfigured or monstrous. It made me think that perhaps this is how a black person looks to whites. I couldn't understand how anyone in the movie could possibly believe he was a black person. No white person in blackface could ever fool me into thinking that he or she was black. Instead, Whitmore was something alien, a projection in the minds of whites. Well, you can see that poison here. You can see that poison in the movie Ghost World from 2001, when miserable Enid, an 18-year-old punk, somehow finds her way into art school. And she finds a teacher who cares about her. And she's gotten involved with an old record collector. She goes to his apartment. Everything is in his apartment is from the 20s and from the 30s. And off in a closet, something he doesn't want anybody to see, is a huge poster, a round poster painted on wood, a wheel, of the most appalling blackface caricature you're ever going to see, with enormous eyes and a tongue lolling out and a big, huge grin. It's just the most offensive thing imaginable, and Enid has never seen anything like it. She knows nothing whatsoever of where it came from, what it's about. It just knocks her out. And so she takes it to the student art show, and she presents it as a piece of found art. And her teacher is absolutely thrilled that she has been able to dig down under the soil of America and come up with this relic that is now radioactive in a way that no one knows how anyone is going to respond to it. Not only that, because of this this breakthrough. She arranges for a special scholarship to a real art college where Enid will be able to go, and Enid is just on top of the world. So the art show is held, people come to it, and people look at this, and black parents of some of the black students in the school look at it, and of course they are absolutely appalled. They can't believe the obnoxiousness. Something, beyond racism. They take racism for granted, but they also take for granted people are going to hide it, that they're going to pretend, that they're going to be polite. And this explodes everything. And it explodes Enid's world. And it explodes her scholarship. And you're watching it, and you're suffering for absolutely everybody in it. You can see the same thing happening in the movie from last year, The Savages. Here, Lenny is suffering from Alzheimer's, and his 2 children have to find a place to put him, and so they put him in a nursing home. And one of the things that happens in the nursing home is that once a week, one of the patients there gets to choose the movie that everybody will watch. And what does Lenny choose? He chooses The Jazz Singer. And he puts it on, and they're watching it. And his kids have never seen it before. They don't really know what's coming up. And they see pictures of the Lower East Side, and they say, "Dad, was that what it was like?" The ages are a little bit off. He's not 114, 130 years old, nevertheless. Yes, that's what it was like. And then, boom, we see a scene of Al Jolson in his dressing room blacking up. There's something even more monstrous, even more soul-killing than Gerald Early looking at James Whitmore, looking, as much like a black person as this microphone, which is black. There's something even worse about watching the act of blacking up, watching this transformation take place. And that's exactly what we're seeing, and that's exactly what people in the nursing home are seeing, and there are black patients. The staff is almost all black, and people are whispering to themselves, and they're beginning to say no, and they're complaining, and why are we watching this, and why do we have to sit through this? And Lenny, who has no boundaries anymore, stands up and begins shouting, it's my night, it's my movie, it's my night. Finally, it's all over, and his middle-aged children are leaving, and every person who works in the nursing home is glaring at them as they walk out and just looking at them with absolute hatred, and they just don't get it. You can see it at the end of at the montage, at the horrifying montage at the end of Spike Lee's 2000 movie Bamboozled. It's a movie about a black television writer who's told, you come up with a hit or else. He doesn't know what to do. He notices the 2 black hip-hop dancers that he passes every day in the street. The light bulb goes off over his head. He's going to put a new minstrel show on the air. He's going to take these 2 kids, and he's going to name them Mantan and Sleep and Eat. Sleep and Eat's going to be the Sambo character to Mantan's Rastus, and they're going to black up, and they're going to go on TV, and they're going to do the new Millennium Minstrel Show. And they do. It becomes a national craze, and everybody now shows up in the audience, and they're hooting and they're yelling, and every audience member is in blackface, and the producer is in blackface, and everyone is in blackface except for the creator of the show. And then the movie ends with bodies absolutely everywhere, everyone killed. It's an Elizabethan massacre. But the montage that ends this, after you've gone through this and after you've been introduced to the charms of blackface and you've been seduced by them, is a montage of both live action and animated film showing black people in the movies, from the beginning of the movies, in the silent era, right up to the present. Every stereotype, every monstrous stereotype you can imagine is there, and it's one after the other and thrown in your face, and it's almost too much to watch. It really is unbearable. So that is the poison. That is the poison. And that's what over the years has driven blackface underground. It emerges in these movies. It emerges as something forbidden, as something that's presented either out of stupidity or mendacity. You don't know, but the result, it's like Night of the Living Dead. These creatures have come back to life. And the response everywhere is disgust and horror and the wish to kill. People saying it's buried. It's gone. It's not supposed to be here. And it's the burial of blackface, that causing it to become something forbidden, something that isn't supposed to be even spoken of, that has led to the explosion of blackface studies over the past few years. And I'm only going to list a few, but there are so many. There's Bart Bull's Does This Road Go to Little Rock that I mentioned from 1992, Eric Lott's Love and Theft in 1993, Mike Rogan's Blackface, White Noise from 1996, Rip Lehman's Raising Cain, Blackface Performance from Jim Crow to Hip Hop from 1998, and his absolutely stupendous 2003 compilation, Jump Jim Crow. There's Nick Tosh's Where Dead Voices Gather from 2001, his biography of the blackface minstrel Emmett Miller. There's John Strasbaugh's Black Like You, playing off of Black Like Me. And just as acute, there is Bamboozled, and there's Kara Walker's amazing My Compliment, My Enemy, My Oppressor, My Love, the huge exhibition of films and defaced Confederate documents, and most of all, the enormous black paper cutout murals, a show that opened at the Walker early last year and just opened at the Hammer in Los Angeles this week. But, you know, for all these studies, going back to the first one is still like a book opening for the first time, is still a breath of air that you can't tell if it's hot or cold. It's something disturbing, but it's something revelatory. You go back to Constance Work, you go back to 1931, American humor, a study of the national character. And the notion was radical then, the idea that there was a national character, especially one made of three parts, the Yankee peddler, the backwoodsman, and the Negro, in the person of the blackface minstrel. That was a radical idea in 1931, and it's radical now, when so many are certain that there is no such thing as a national character, and that there shouldn't be. All this happens in her book in a slip, if it is a slip. Here was that legendary assumption of wisdom, which had appeared persistently among American comic characters. The rise of the Negro minstrel coincided with a marked change in his place within the nation. For by his place, Constance's work means not the place of the Negro minstrel, a minstrel character played by a white American. She doesn't even mean the place of the Negro minstrel if it was played by a black person. She's not talking about a white minstrel pretending to be a black character, which grammatically follows and which would be redundant. She means that the rise of the Negro minstrel reflects a change in the status of the Negro himself or herself as such. In other words, the identification that she makes between the blackface minstrel and the Negro is sometimes absolute. Is it because the Negro has no other voice? Note that she never comes close to the ruling historical orthodoxy of her time, that slavery was not terrible, that it wasn't bad, that the comic portrayal of the Negro meant really that the slaves were happy. She never goes near that. The rise of the Negro minstrel coincided with a marked change in his place, the Negro's place, that slip within the nation. Little Jim Crow appeared at almost the precise moment when William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, was founded. And minstrelsy spread over the land and grew in popularity as the struggle for emancipation grew in power through the 1840s and the 1850s. The Negro minstrel joined with the Yankee and the backwoodsman to make a comic trio, appearing in the same era with the same timely intensity. The era, of course, was the turbulent era of Jacksonian democracy, that stormy time when many basic elements in the national character seem to come to the surface. And she says the Negro minstrel was deeply grounded in reality, even though the impersonators were white, even though the figure was a myth. These three figures, the Yankee peddler, the backwoodsman, the minstrel, they loomed large, not because they represented any considerable numbers in the population, but because something in the nature of each induced an irresistible response. Each had been a wanderer over the land, the Negro a forced and unwilling wanderer. Each in his fashion had broken bonds, the Yankee in the initial revolt against the parent civilization, the backwoodsman in a revolt against all civilization, the Negro in a revolt that was cryptic and submerged, but which nonetheless made a perceptible outline. As figures, they embodied a deep-lying mood of disseverance, carrying the popular fancy farther and farther from any fixed or traditional heritage. But for the Negro minstrel, whatever we're talking about, the Negro inside the minstrel wearing the black man, triumph was in his humor, but not triumph over circumstance. Rather, this was an unreasonable, headlong triumph heading into the realm of the preposterous. Now, the minstrels went to plantations, or they sent scouts to plantations and to southern towns to get the latest dances, the latest tall tales, the latest jokes, catchphrases. Everything in minstrel shows had to be authentic, but Rourke is right behind them. She couldn't be digging more deeply, putting herself there like a spy, following the minstrel step by step. Thomas D. Rice is the man who made the minstrel, the blackface minstrel, into a pop explosion. He wasn't the first by any means, but in 1830, he was the one who brought the idea of a blackface American to critical mass, and suddenly the song that he was singing became a song that everyone wanted to sing, a song that couldn't be escaped. He was born in 1808. He was from New York. He was an itinerant theater actor. And one night in 1830, he found himself in Louisville, and he introduced a blackface character into a play called The Rifle. In the ads, they called the character Sambo. "But I knocked down dis Sambo," Rice's Jim Crow would chant. "I knocked down dis Sambo and shut up his light, for I'm just about as sassy as if I was half white." Jim Crow was a black folklore figure. Rice always claimed that he got the dance called Jim Crow. He got it from a black, crippled stable hand in Cincinnati, somebody named Jim Crow. He just did the strangest dance. He leaped, he jumped, always with his arms akimbo, defying gravity. Can we see Jim Crow Rice? So that's Thomas D. Rice as Jim Crow, with his arms akimbo. So suddenly, everybody is singing his song. It's a pop explosion. It changes the landscape. Everybody is seeing their country differently. They're seeing each other differently. It's been said forever that Elvis Presley was just the latest version of T.D. Rice. Well, it makes as much sense to see T.D. Rice as a version of Elvis Presley. We know the impact Elvis Presley had on this country and the world, and T.D. Rice's was no less. Like Davy Crockett in Rice's hands, Jim Crow becomes an enormous figure. He bestrides the earth. He is a walking tall tale. I whip my weight in wildcats, I eat an alligator, I drink the Mississippi dry. The time will come when the minstrel character Zip Coon, the scholar he calls himself, S-K-O-L-L-A-R, the scholar, the man of secret knowledge, maybe in league with the devil, maybe just out for a laugh, Zip Coon in minstrel plays will become president, forcing the pro-Calhoun Congressman Davy Crockett, who always thought he should be president, to take up the bottom of the ticket. But for now, before this happens, for now Andrew Jackson is president and Thomas Daddy Jim Crow Rice is dressed up in blackface. He's dressed up as a blackface Uncle Sam. He's got his top hat. He's got his flowing white hair. And he's ripping $5 and $10 gold pieces off of his coat and his vest, and he's tossing them into the crowd the way Elvis threw scarves. But none of this has happened yet when Rice begins to perform his song, The Original Jim Crow. And it's only a year after the character emerged. It's only 1831. It's all done in Southern darky talk, all obs and wids and d's, with the already famous chorus that everybody in the country knows by now. Wheel about and turn about and do just so, and every time I wheel about I jump Jim Crow. But Jim Crow is turning into a runaway slave. He's a free man and a fugitive. He's surviving by his wits, appearing and disappearing all over the country. And out of every time I wheel about can spring anything, acts limited only by the imagination of the performer and the audience's willingness to follow him. Jim Crow is laughing at John Calhoun's interposition and nullification. If I marry and don't like it, I'll nullify the act. He's praising Jackson. Old Hickory is a man that's darn tarn all full of metal. And then, as if doing a conceptual moonwalk, he performs a transference. And who's he? Is it Thomas Daddy Jim Crow Rice? Is it Jim Crow? Is it a figment of Rice's imagination? Is it a figment of the audience's imagination? And the audiences were white, and the audiences were black. Who is imagining this figure? Who is accepting him? Who is pushing Rice farther and farther? He's going much too fast. Should they get to fighting, perhaps the blacks will rise, for their wish for freedom is shining in their eyes. And if the blacks should get free, I guess they'll fee some bigger, and I shall consider it a bold stroke for the nigger. And I'm for freedom, I'm for union altogether, and though I'm a black man, the white is called my brother. But take nothing for granted, he says, in lines that foreshadow Tennessee Ernie Ford's 16 tons, 124 years later. I caution all de white dandies not to come in my way, for as sure as they insult me, they'll in the gutter lay. Rice is not a minstrel, not in the usual sense of a minstrel show. He's a stage actor. He writes full-length plays. He sends Jim Crow to Washington to give advice to Andrew Jackson. By the 1840s, with Dan Emmett claiming authorship of The Bluetail Fly and Dixie and Old Dan Tucker, Jim Crow begins to fade back into Sambo, into Rastus. Instead of the runaway slave, you've got the plantation layabout. The trickster, now the trickster's only trick is to get out of work. The full racist assemblage, the real minstrel show. And Jim Crow Rice begins to fade into the background. In 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin is published, and Rip Lehman imagines that Harriet Beecher Stowe may have unconsciously named Uncle Tom after Thomas Daddy Rice. You read that and you think, why unconsciously? In any case, in 1854 at the Bowery Theater in New York, there is Jim Crow Rice playing Uncle Tom. Now, we don't have any video of that. We don't have any, we don't have anything we can look at, unfortunately. However, there is an audio tape. This is from the Firesign Theater, a 60s comedy group, a group whose medium was not the stage, but the recording studio. This is from their 1974 Everything You Know Is Wrong, and it cuts into a radio fanatic's pronouncements about space aliens and Nazis. Somehow, he's gotten a tape of a 19th century recording of one of the countless minstrel plays that was based on Uncle Tom's Cabin. So here we've got Colonel Beauregard, we've got his daughter, and we've got Tom. Can we play it?
This is a very rare recording from long ago.
What is it, my darling sister?
Oh, wonderful news! The war is over! The brutal industrial north has been defeated by the gentlemanly agricultural south.
Mississippi cow hard will leave his wine cellar such a dangerous time.
Think of the balls you'll have.
You're too young to think about that, Beulah balls and bells.
They should impeach that poor criminal. Why, Uncle Tom, you're back.
Uncle Field Marshal Thomas Aubrey quadroon, honey. I'm back, and I'm beautiful. I'm so glad that you're back, Tom. That's right, Tom. I forgot. You're a free man now. Oh, no, I ain't, General. I's expensive. I's a professional thing now. You want me to walk it over this cute old woman? Yeah. Put it right here in the bag. Yes, for me. Bang first. It's a new world, honey. Nobody can have to be a slave all the time. No more. We going to take turns. And guess who's doing it in now?
And here we're absolutely back to metaphysics. And we're back to Carol Walker, back to my compliment, my enemy, my oppressor, my love. You walk into the museum, and in enormous galleries all over the walls, you see violence and torture and defecation, childbirth indistinguishable from defecation. You see mutilation, you see rape. In one picture, and you're looking at black paper cutouts. You're looking at silhouettes everywhere. And in one picture, a boy seems to be carrying a fiddle. And you look harder, you realize it's his leg. And later, you see it being sawn off. There are many sources to this, but caricatures of the minstrel show the exaggerated features, the pratfall poses, the erasure of individuality that is inherent in the silhouettes. You only see types, not individuals. The minstrel show predominates. And the figures are almost in motion. You can see them strut and whirl. You can see their jerky steps. Most of all, there's sex, and it's all over the walls, and it's always ambiguous who's doing what to who's involved. There'll be a Scarlett O'Hara in a huge skirt with acres of petticoats, but there will be 2 pairs of legs holding it up. Everywhere there's polymorphous perversity. In other words, there's everybody everywhere in every possible sexual combination, adults, children, black and white. And somehow it's always possible, even though everybody is black on these walls, it's always possible to tell who's white and who isn't, because James Whitmore is right up there. You're not going to, Kara Walker is not going to let you be fooled. But what you're looking at on these walls is the porn version of the minstrel show. This is the act you only get to see if you know who to ask, if you know enough to ask to see the real show. And it's dizzying. It's hard to look at. And you look away. And disgust pours in like a dam breaking, and it floods. And the flood turns into fascination. That just what is it that's going on over there? When the flood recedes, the fascination takes over. It's there in a film with the silhouettes now used as marionettes, where you see the Firesign Theater's minstrel show coming back. Nobody gonna have to be a slave all the time no more. We gwine take times. We're told that the whites, longing for fulfillment, have sold their bodies to us. But nevertheless, in the same film, a white master rapes and impregnates a black male slave. It's twisted and turned and scratched. Everything is defaced. There is a whole room full of Confederate documents. Harper's Pictorial History of the Civil War, published while the war was still going on, and done, depending on your point of view, redone by Walker while the war is still going on, with Harper's graffitied over with Walker's. So you read both at once, or rather you can't read either. Here's a sample full page. The last delegates from Alabama and the Congress of the United States, a page of well-fed, pompous white faces, and appended to every single face a sex solicitation ads for spanking, for golden showers, for underage girls. In another film, there are 5 screens showing historical engravings, more puppet footage, battle scenes, Civil War photographs. And then the modern images pop up, the modern images showing you that the war was never over, like a gay porn drawing a white Hulk in overalls with a CSA logo, Confederate States of America. It's unstable. It isn't clear what the artist means. It isn't clear what you're supposed to see. It isn't clear what you're supposed to feel. You don't know who's talking. You don't know who you are. It's so remarkable the way the silhouettes make everybody black. It's the opposite of what blind Alfred Reed sang about in 1929. He was a white singer. He was a wonderful fiddle player, and he had a song. He was a crank. He was a crank. He wrote a lot of songs asking women to stop bobbing their hair. It really bothered him. But he had a wonderful song called There'll Be No Distinction There, about how all divisions between people, black and white, male and female, all divisions of class, all divisions of everything imaginable, in heaven they'll all be erased because we'll all be white in that heavenly light. Here, blackface is a costume. It's a makeup. It's worn by everybody. But again, here, blackness is itself a blackface. It's assumed. It's enforced. Kara Walker herself, she was born in 1969 in Stockton, California, where her father was a professor, and she moved to Atlanta when she was 13. I became black in more senses than just the kind of multicultural acceptance that I grew up with in California. Blackness became all about forbidden passions and desires, about a history that's still living, the shame of the South, its legacy, and its present. But listen to those first 3 words more than the rest. I became black. Now, to go from the desperation and the grandeur and the limitless ambition and the humor and the scatology and the passion of Kara Walker's work so unstable, again, so unclear in its motives and its meanings, that some years ago, not long ago, an entire group of black artists and museum curators and writers banded together to demand that her work not be shown, that it not be written about, that it be boycotted and denounced. To go from that to the lowest kind of satire, where smugness and cynicism is so completely the currency that it's impossible to believe that anything could be at stake or anything could be at risk. But that's where, over the last year, the blackface story went. You can see it in an episode of the Sarah Silverman program just a few months ago. Sarah Silverman, possibly the most obnoxious person on television, someone who communicates a deeper smugness than Paris Hilton, someone whose whole way of being in the world is a smirk, someone who wears her disdain for everybody else like I have no idea what. That's Sarah Silverman. She is absolutely intolerable. But she did a show in October called Face Wars. And it opens as she goes to the Valley Village Country Club to play tennis, and she's asked her name. Silverman, she says. She's told suddenly, because she knows this is a club where anybody can play, she's told only members can play. I'm sure you'll understand, the woman says. Oh, I understand, she says, perfectly. So she goes to meet her sister and her sister's policeman boyfriend at a cafe. I've just been the victim of a hate crime, she says. She says what happens. She said to me, "Get out, Jew." She said that? Well, basically, with her eyes. I mean, she says, I swear there's nothing harder in the world than being Jewish. Nothing harder in the world. Eugene, the black waiter, drifts over and he says, excuse me, miss, I think there are harder things than being Jewish, like being black. Did black people have the Holocaust? No, but we did have 400 years of slavery. The contempt almost melts the bones in her face. Oh, I'm so sorry you guys had to have great singing voices and really catchy songs while we got, oh yeah, murder showers. Oh, so what you're saying is because of our music, we suffer less than the Jews? She shakes her head as if nothing could be more obvious in the world. Yes. You know, ma'am, the waiter says, I wish for one day you could walk a mile in my shoes. I bet you wouldn't last a day. And she takes up the challenge. She goes to a makeup artist who fits her out with a blackface mask. Deep black and white, deep black, but like a mask, you know, like a little Halloween mask, that you're like a Robin's mask, Batman and Robin. Just a little black mask with huge white lips, not like a traditional blackface at all, but, you know, a party mask. And somehow it's worse. Somehow it trivializes the awfulness of blackface. It's halfway. It's not even going all the way. So she walks down the street, and a middle-aged white woman passes her. She says, that's disgusting. And an older Jewish man passes her. I spent my life trying to rid the world of people like you. You'd burn in hell. If you burn in hell, I'd be in heaven. And she says, I had no idea how cruel white people can be to us. She thinks she's black. She thinks they see her as black. And this turns into a stomach-churning colonialism when she sees a black church and she goes into the black church and, you know, unable to dance, unable to move. There's gospel singing going on, there's clapping, and there's dancing. She walks up onto the altar place in the most clumsy parody of a cakewalk. She grabs the mic from the lead singer. She begins singing Victory Is Mine in this awful, thin and tuneless voice, and there's just total silence. Everybody is stunned. Everybody in the church, they can't believe they've lived their lives to see this sight. They kick her out. She goes back to the restaurant. She says, oh, Eugene, I'm sorry. It's just so much harder to be black than it is to be Jewish. I'd kill myself if I were black. Well, Eugene is now dressed up in a kippah and side curls and a strap-on big nose and an I Love Money t-shirt. And he's out of breath and he's harried and he's nervous and he says, no, you're right. It's much harder being Jewish. So you don't know where this is going. She's horrified by this sight. She sees a black man dressed up as a Jew, and she sees what Gerald Early saw when he saw James Whitmore made up as a black man. The disgust is rising in her. Unfortunately, the show lets this go. What happens next? She sees a ticket on her car. She accuses the cop of giving her a ticket because she's black. The cop looks at her as if she's completely crazy. She begins screaming at him. Some woman is filming everything on a cell phone. She says, police brutality, police brutality. He says, you're under arrest. It wouldn't be because I'm black, would it? No, what the hell are you looking like this anyway, says the cop. You have a problem with me being black? It's disgusting. It's way over the line, lady. She mimes being beaten while she's being handcuffed. She slams her own body against the police car while the cop holds his hands in the air and the woman with the cell phone is filming her. That's it. She's in custody at the police station. There's a TV network about an apparently racially motivated arrest. There's an interviewer in the police station with Sarah Silverman. It seems to me that up until now, there wasn't much discussion of race in America. The whole subject was taboo, but you started the dialogue. Is it worth all this? And Sarah Silverman says, well, I don't want to compare myself to Abraham Lincoln, but there are some undeniable common factors. We're both white people fighting for the rights of African Americans. We're both attracted to men. And I encourage people to join me in this movement. It's a great way to contribute to society without really taking away from me time. It's kind of throw it on and let it set and forget about it. Suddenly, there's a rally outside of black-faced people, and they're all wearing these funny little party masks, which just get more awful and disgusting. The more you see, and there's even a little baby, an infant, wearing its little blackface mask. And people are chanting, and they're chanting, what do we want? We want freedom to explore issues of race and American culture through the use of postmodern irony. Well, his sister's boyfriend cop appears to explain that the reason she was arrested was the cop ran her ID and she had 2,000 unpaid parking tickets, and that's why she was arrested. It had nothing to do with her being black or even in blackface. And she comes out of the police station. There's strings, there are church bells. Ladies and gentlemen, she says to the crowd of adoring black-faced white people, ladies and gentlemen, I woke up this morning with a great vision, a vision of playing tennis. But how can I exercise when justice is not exercised? And that's why I stand before you today, an angry, black-faced woman. I had a great vision. It's just far enough for Martin Luther King on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on August 28, 1963, at the March on Washington, summoning those words, I have a dream, is just far enough away to believe that she's not engaging in a blackface parody of that historic moment. Citizens, what they say is true. In the words of the old Negro spiritual, and now, in a sense, the blackface comes off. She's seizing the climax of King's speech. In the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. And in the inevitable travesty of blackface, what has people on the street saying disgusting without a second thought? She is about to commit the ultimate American blasphemy. Citizens, what they say is true. In the words of the old Negro spiritual, I've gone black and I can't go back. Well, inside the station, the boyfriend cop is demonstrating the safety mechanism on a new pistol. He accidentally fires. The bullet ricochets out the door. It hits her in the arm, and she collapses. And the show has now collapsed Martin Luther King's assassination into the great speech of 5 years before. It's all symbols. It's all sound bites. There's no cultural memory. And the cultural theft is so profound that it might not even register at all. So big, it's so big it blanks out thought. So she's in the hospital. Her sister is wiping off the blackface when the woman from the country club comes in. Silverman wakes up. The blackface is almost all gone. All that's left is a little black squib under her nose. In other words, a Hitler mustache. Well, Sarah Silverman says, if it isn't Valley Village's favorite anti-Semite. Hate any Jews lately? I deserve that. Sarah, you were right. I didn't let you into the club this morning because you were Jewish. But, well, when I saw you on TV today in blackface, I realized could have been a lot worse. And that sting brings it home. Yep, there's racism everywhere. She did find it. She did expose it. She's a true inheritor of Jim Crow rice. The story is just a story. It goes on. It doesn't stop. Somebody has to black himself up for somebody else to stay white. A lot more to say, but not tonight. Thank you.